Good afternoon, everyone. It is 12:03, Thursday, October 27th, 2022, and I'm calling to order the virtual meeting of the Los Angeles Probation Oversight Commission. I am Frankie Carrillo, Chair of the Commission. Now, Wendy Julian, our Executive Director, will explain how you can participate during this meeting, and then she will take the roll. Wendy?
Good afternoon. Thanks, Chair Carrillo. As you all know, we welcome and encourage public participation in our meetings today. Thank you for attending. I also just wanted to start today by saying thank you to the representatives from the Probation Department who are here today on the panel and in our participant list. We've done a few things this last 10 days that have required a lot of time from probation employees, including our employee town hall, this meeting, 2 inspections, and preparation for the panels today. And I just want to say publicly how much I appreciate the time that takes and how open you all are for attending our meetings. It's helpful. So thank you. And thank you to members of the public who are here as well. There will be an opportunity for public comment on each agenda item at the end of our meeting for items not on the agenda. The way this is going to work is Chair Carrillo will introduce each agenda item. We'll hear a presentation on the agenda item. Then we'll take public comment, and then the commission will discuss the item and take any action. The best way to make live comment is to pre-register. We'll have a queue with your name on it. But if you're here already, then you can just use the raise your hand function. There's a little icon at the bottom that looks like a hand, or you may need to press the 3 dots to get to the raise your hand function. If you have any technical questions or any problems with raising your hand, just send a message in the chat. Janae will get your message and put you in the queue to speak. Also, if you're on your phone, you can speak. You can raise your hand just by pressing *3. As soon as we call your number, because we can't see your name if you're on the phone, we'll call your phone number and you type *6 to accept the unmute request, and then you can make your comment. We're going to give commenters 2 minutes today, unless Chair Carrillo determines otherwise based on how many people are signed up for each item. If you want to make your comment in writing, please send us an email to info@poc.lacounty.gov. I mentioned this in our employee town hall on Monday, and I'll say it here as well for the members of the public. If you wish to make a comment that is anonymous, we also can accept those comments. And if you just indicate that in the email that you send, we will take great care to eliminate the identifying information and share those with commissioners or share them as public comment based on what you request. Please do not send public comments in the chat. Only the host and presenter get to see those. The commissioners don't see them, neither do I, and they won't be logged as public comment, and it doesn't follow the Brown Act. Our meeting is being broadcast live today to our Facebook page. You can watch the meeting on Facebook Live. You can also watch the meeting on Facebook later, but there's no engagement with users on Facebook. You can also watch it on our YouTube channel and subscribe to our channel. You can also watch a recap of the meeting if you don't want to watch the full couple hours of the meeting. Please follow our social media accounts, sign up for our listserv. We're at LA County POC for more information. Bienvenidos a ustedes que están con nosotros hoy para nuestra reunión. Si quiere hacer su comentario público en español, le invitamos y podemos proveer servicios de traducción. Les daremos 4 minutos. Nomás díganos que quiere hacer su comentario en español y yo le puedo traducir o usted puede traer su propio traductor. Bienvenidos. And at this point, I will call the roll. Commissioner Dolores Canales.
Thank you. Here.
Commissioner Danielle Dupuy.
Here.
Commissioner Sean Garcia-Lays.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson will be joining us shortly, and I will indicate for the minutes and for you to know Chair Carrillo when she arrives. Commissioner Sam Lewis.
Here.
Commissioner Don Meredith is not in attendance today. Commissioner Dominique Nong. Do we not have Dominique on yet, Janae?
She's waiting to get elevated as a panelist.
Okay. Let's see if we can do that. Great. Welcome. Okay, Commissioner Nong, can you hear me?
Good afternoon, present.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Yamashiro also will be joining late today, and I will indicate to you Chair Carrillo when he arrives, and Chair Carrillo.
Thank you, Wendy. Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks again, Wendy. Now we will proceed with the agenda for today. Do we have one? We do have one guest speaker today who will be joining us at 1:30 for item number 4. till then. So we will take the items in order until we get to that item and then see how we are doing on time. And we may take things out of order. But for now, let's get started with item number 2, which is the approval of October 13th meetings minutes. Do we have any written public comments, Wendy, or live public comments for this item?
I believe not. Is that correct, Janae?
That's correct.
Okay, and just to remind folks, if you want to make a public comment, just use the raise your hand function, but we don't have any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve October 13th minutes?
Motion approval.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Lewis and second by Commissioner
Garcia Lace.
Garcia Lace. Thank you. Are there any changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none. Commissioners, please
I
unmute
see
yourselves.
Commissioner Nong's hand up, Chair Carrillo.
Oh, I'll take that back then. Commissioner Nong?
Thank you. I just wondered if we could amend the minutes to note 2 requests that I made of the probation department last meeting. And that was a request to receive a copy of the list of changes that the BSCC said either needed or recommended that needed to be made to Camp Kilpatrick, and also a copy of the plan that Deputy Chief Fletcher had said she was submitting to the BSCC later that day, giving a 30-day update on the 1-to-1 staffing ratio and any suggested plan for how to make any adjustments moving forward.
Wendy, this is the first time we've adjusted the minutes. Do we need to vote on this? Do we just accept it,
I think whoever made the motion, and I didn't write that down, needs to agree to approve the minutes as amended. Was that Sham? Is that you?
That was Commissioner Lewis who
Commissioner
initiated.
Lewis. Commissioner Lewis, so I think you need to agree to amend your motion to say that you're moving to approve the minutes as amended.
I agree. I move and agree to have the minutes amended based on what Commissioner Long said, with a request were in the previous meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And the second was?
I second the amended motion.
Great. So now we can vote.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves and vote with a voice vote. Aye.
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 Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3. Item number 3, in which we will discuss and take appropriate action on progress the Los Angeles County Probation Department has made moving youth disposition to the secure track to Campus Kilpatrick and future plans for additional SYTF sites. Good morning, good afternoon, actually, Deputy Chiefs Patino and Fletcher. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Carrillo. I will certainly defer to Chief Fletcher here. I just want to give an update on what the JGRBG is up to at the moment. So we're spending a lot of time talking about spending. So we are looking at allocations that we have received from the state, spending some time going through existing services and programs on site, both at Barry J and Campus Kilpatrick, and looking at expansion. So we have a subcommittee of our subcommittee who is working specifically on those items, and we're working as quickly as possible to bring some recommendations to the larger group. Our next meeting is November 9th, where we will discuss in greater detail what some of those recommendations are. At the same time, discussing some governance around how funding decisions will be made moving forward. So that we can ensure that that is a very collaborative process, that we're not sitting in our offices deciding what's best, but really taking advice of those working on the line with our young people, as well as folks who are part of our stakeholder groups. So that is the update for the JGRBG. And I know there's some specific operational updates from Chief Fletcher.
Thank you. So we submitted our response to the BSCC about some of the Title 24 outstanding issues that they identified just prior to our move of 6 youth. I submitted a response to the BSCC on October the 14th. have checked in with them a couple of times. They actually just notified us this morning that we would be receiving a letter today with their response, and that will dictate whether or not we can immediately move additional youth to Kilpatrick from Barry J. We have at this moment identified the next cohort of young people to move. So we are waiting on that response from them. And these items, and I will make sure and follow up to make sure that you get a hard copy of the outstanding items that we addressed. You know, it was an additional lock and chain on a gate. It's the roller bars and the patio areas. So there are some of those things that are happening. There was a supply chain issue with getting the roller bars and the anti-climb fencing through Adam's shop. And we now have a date of November 30th when we should have all of that installed, which is great news. So we'll be able to reevaluate at that point to see how we can even move additional youth beyond this next cohort. So we will know more hopefully today when we receive that letter from the VSCC. But we are ready and waiting for that particular communication so that we can move them as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Bettino and Fletcher. Wendy, do we have any written or live public comments for this item?
I'd like to invite folks, if you would like to make a comment, to use the raise your hand function, or if you're on the phone to dial *3. You just click on the little hand function down below, or click on the 3 dots to raise your hand. And we do have a couple of public comments. I don't believe we had any written public comments. Is that correct, Janae?
That's correct.
All right, so we're going to start with Aditi Sherakar, and we're going to put the timer up on the screen, if you can do that. And Aditi will unmute you, and then you have to unmute yourself, I think.
Good morning.
Good morning. Feel free to begin, Aditi.
Afternoon. Aditi Sherakar from Children's Defense Fund, California. I want to talk today about the criteria for sending young people to Kilpatrick. So the Board of Supervisors already passed a motion that SYTF youth should be sent to Kilpatrick. This is the law, and probation has been flagrantly breaking it. And now that we have the so-called criteria they use in determining whether to make an exception and follow the law, unsurprisingly, it's completely arbitrary and hypocritical, and it's a set of standards that youth must adhere to that probation themselves fails to meet every single day. If you take a look at a few of these, one of them is display positive/good behavior and have a good attitude even when you don't get what you want. Unless you're an LA County probation officer, in which case you're welcome to call out and not show up to work and face no consequences when you don't get what you want. Youth must attend school, but probation needs to focus more on making their own officers attend their actual jobs. Youth have to follow basic expectation guidelines, which is kind of a joke considering that probation's own officers can't follow basic attendance guidelines. Youth have to participate in mental health sessions, but we know for a fact that because officers are calling out, youth can't be taken into their mental health visits. This is LA probation setting up young people to fail. And so I implore the POC to investigate how many young people are deemed not ready based on these metrics. And if the reason for that is that they're missing programming, therapy, or they're being in lockdown due to probation callouts. All of us should be outraged at the document that lays out these standards. And I really hope that you take a closer look at not just the standards, but how it is being impacted by all the callouts of probation's own making. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Damon Ayala. Damon, we're going to unmute you. Okay, you're unmuted, Damon, and you can begin.
My name is Damon Ayala. I'm MSW with LA Youth Uprising. I'd like to remind everybody that we're well into the second year of the SYTF relocation process. And I think we would all agree that neither Central nor Barry J were ever intended as long-term housing for incarcerated youth to serve out their disposition. The halls weren't designed for long-term residency, nor for the more specialized programming that we now know is what our youth needs to heal from the traumas that bring them there in the first place. Yet there you allow them to sit, some for as long as a year. Requiring young people to prove themselves worthy of relocation by meeting arbitrary criteria, all while being warehoused in an environment that compels young people to comply through coercion, intimidation, and violence, is cruel and unusual. Probation asking any young person to maintain a positive attitude and good behavior for 60 consecutive days prior to movement, particularly anyone that has endured traumas, including the traumas of being separated from family, is not truly looking to move anyone to Kilpatrick. To this day, I can hardly be positive and exhibit good behavior for 60 consecutive days myself. So shouldn't we be looking to immediately place these young people in a positive environment if we expect positive behaviors and attitudes? That positive environment is Campus Kilpatrick, and it's time to place these young people there now. Thank you.
Thank you, Damon. Next up, we have Thomas. Thomas, you're unmuted.
I agree that there need to be requirements to go to Kilpatrick. Asking a minor to behave and do what the court asks them to do for 60 days isn't a tough requirement. We can't send someone who is acting out, causing violence to Kilpatrick, and then call it a safe environment. It won't be a safe environment if we send kids up there that's doing that. It's going to turn into another section of the halls. But if they earn their way up there, they know they earned it up there, they feel a sense of accomplishment because they got there, then they'll have more, it would be a more safer environment because they feel like I earned my way up here and I don't want to lose it. And obviously the last two people never really worked in the halls or worked with these kids probably in an environment that we work in order for them to say that. So, I mean, these requirements aren't really hard. It's 60 days. It's what they're supposed to do anyway, according to the courts. And it helps them when they move over there because now they know they earned their way up there. They deserve to be up there, and they're going to work to stay up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I don't see any other hands raised. Just making sure we got everybody. I think that's it, Chair Carrillo.
Thank you, Wendy. I see some hands up already. Commissioners, as a reminder, if you'd like to comment, please raise your hands. Commissioner Canales, I saw your hand go up and down, so I'll make a comment before I call on you, Commissioner Canales. Deputy Chief Fletcher, you mentioned that there was another cohort. You didn't say cohort, but I'm going to say cohort. How many of those youth have you identified as being prepared to go?
There are a variety of youth. I can't give you the exact number at this point. What we're trying to do is move them in small cohorts. So the cohort that I'm talking about is the next group to be moved. There are many other young people that are doing quite well in SYTF. And so I don't want to say that there's only 4, 5, 6 that are ready because there are more ready. We want to move them in smaller cohorts.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Canales, you're up.
Thank you, Commissioner Carrillo. I would just like to say, I did spend a good portion of the day at Camp Kilpatrick the other day and was able to spend a good amount of time with the young men that are there right now and time alone. We weren't being listened to or anything. And I took a lot of notes. We had a lot of great conversations, a lot of laughter. And, it was just so inspiring to hear them talk about themselves, saying this program is working and we're here because we have integrity, and even hearing their concerns. And I gave them my word. I said, you don't know what these meetings are like. I was giving them some feedback on the meetings, but I gave them my word because everybody is so concerned about the youth, about the placement, the individuals that are housed in these facilities. So I gave them my word that I was going to convey their message. That they are very concerned about massive moves. Yes, there is cohorts that are ready to be moved, but the more you try to rush this, there's something very successful right now. And the more you try to rush this and concerned about what would happen to their program as it moved forward, although they themselves admit, there's individuals that are ready to be moved here. And one thing that I have seen in the past, there's been successful programs in the past, time and time again. I mean, we know there's even that movie, The Gridiron Game, about the positive things that have happened in the past. And then somewhere along the line, that it gets overblown or they pull the plug, or when there's been success for the youth. And that's one thing we're all concerned about. We keep saying that over and over again. So as these moves take place, I just want to make sure that their messaging inside continues to be conveyed, that their priorities can continue to be first on the table. I know I met with staff that are excited about this program. You could see it in them. You could see the energy. There's people that want this to work. And so I hope we can all continue to work together in making their voices heard as well as our wants and our demands and everything else, and put their concerns first at the table, since we keep saying we need to hear from them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Commissioner Lewis.
Commissioner Carrillo, I believe Commissioner do before me. I'm sorry.
No problem. Commissioner Dupuy, you're up.
Thank you. Thanks, Sam. Or thanks, Commissioner Lewis. I just, wanted to respond a little bit to some of the comments, because it's my understanding that this isn't necessarily a thing for young people to earn. I mean, the halls is not a place that's supposed to have long-term stays for young people. So I was just a little bit disturbed by that comment, but I also I really understand wanting to have a process that moves young people in small cohorts, but just so I can get some clarity around and things, Chief Deputy Fletcher, the criteria that's being used for readiness to move in the small cohorts, that is not meant to say that if at the end of the day a young person does not meet these criteria, that they will not go to Kilpatrick. Everyone is supposed to go to Kilpatrick. Is that a correct or accurate statement?
You are correct, Commissioner Dupuy. These are a general set of guidelines, right? So we want to be mindful that a young person's behavior changes based on their environment and what they're going through and what the court hearings might be and all of that, right? And as others have said, we want to make sure that the young people are prepared. And as Commissioner Canales very clearly stated, we are constantly talking to the youth, and it is interesting to talk to the 6 who are there, who have already identified and verbalized who they think should come next, who they think is going to fit into the program to continue to be successful, because those 6 kids are really committed to success. They want to be better people based on the services that they receive. They're having a lot of great interactions with mental health who's on site. We're looking forward to more services coming in. HDA, ARC has been there. We want the credible messengers to be embedded in that. And so all of those things are considered. So we have a capacity of 48 at Kilpatrick if it's full. And we have more than that at Barry J in Secure Youth Track, and more young people pending that disposition very likely. And so we're trying to balance that, and we don't want to set it up for failure. We want all of the kids to be successful. So everyone at some point, right, it's not about earning, it's about the readiness and making sure that we're safe, and all of those things are taken into consideration.
All right. And I know that there are also, we talked about some literal facility issues that are limiting the number of young people that can be at Kilpatrick at any given time. I've been told that's in part some supply chain issues held over from COVID and all those things. But I'm wondering, given that the time delay and all of that, is it going to be the case, or do we know if it's going to be the case that any of the young people that are at Kilpatrick may end up going home prior to the move of all the young people from Barry J? And I'm just wondering, like, if there will end up being more young people that can move to Kilpatrick because some have already completed their sentence and get to go home.
Sure. At this point, we have 6, and that requires the one-on-one supervision until the facility issues are resolved. So as I mentioned before, November 30th is the timeline that Mr. Bettino has identified for the installation of the anti-climb fencing and the roller bars. So that will alleviate the need to have the one-on-one staffing. And those are the conversations that we're having with the BSCC. With some of the items that we have been able to rectify, and with a timeline of November 30th, is there a way that we can move additional youth? So if there are youth moving out into housing, so we know likely at least one of our young people could move into a housing facility in the community. And if that happens, then we certainly would bring somebody else into that slot. So we want to keep what we're approved to have at all times at that capacity.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lewis, you're up.
Thank you, Commissioner Carrillo, Chair Carrillo. Want to echo what my fellow Commissioner Canales said. Everything that the young people have talked about and how they feel and what their experience, and they're doing great in Campus Kilpatrick. But I also want to give a shout out to probation. I live towards Sylmar, so oftentimes on my way home, I just pop in to see what's going on. I normally mentor on Saturdays, but the past week and a half, I've just stopped in. On Sunday, I came in, and one of the units from the SYTF was out in the grass. And historically, you didn't bring the kids out of the compound or the young people out of the compound to be on the grass. They were out playing soccer. They were eating barbecue. And so, and you could see conversations going on with staff there. And I just stood and watched for a few minutes. And then I came back yesterday. I just popped up in another one of the units out of the SYTF was out on the grass again with staff running around, exercising. And so I see these shifts. And then in addition to that, the number of fights have begun to decrease. And I'm observing because I'm going from units, and I look in, they have logbooks where you can go through the logbooks to see what's transpired in the units. And I look in the logbooks. And so I have to say that I'm seeing shift, and I've noticed they have a new director that's involved with the SYTF, and another staff that's, I think they call it BMP, Behavioral Management Program. And they're 100% in the working with these young people and making sure that they get to their program. So I'm seeing a shift that I'm impressed with. And if you know, I have not been saying a lot of nice things, but I see it, not just on the days that when I go in and mentor, but now that I'm just popping up. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the staff that are making that happen at Barry J. I see it, I recognize it, and I ask that you, the line staff, continue to send word up the chain through the Chief Fletcher and the superintendent, and let us know what you need to support our young people. If these changes continue, I can see a lot of good things happening. And then in terms of the youth that are prepared to go to Campus Kilpatrick, what they've done is they've moved them out of the compound into Unit RNS. And going into Unit RNS, they have conversations, like real conversations amongst themselves about behaving and not screwing up each other's program. And when you see them and listen to them have their own conversations, it's like you see they're young adults and teenagers, but you see them growing into becoming the best version of themselves. So I have to say that I see some improvement. It's not where I wanted at, or where most of us wanted at, but I see the shift and the improvement. So I got to just say that, let's keep pushing it forward.
Ditto, Commissioner Lewis. Commissioner Nung, you're up.
Hi, thank you. Just- I think I'm hearing something different than what was reported at the last meeting about this move, and especially with regard to the BSCC. So first I am going to make a request that we immediately receive a copy of the BSCC's response. If it's supposed to be coming this Monday, I would really like to be able to see it immediately because this is time sensitive. If it's now true, which I heard differently last time, that probation is going to wait to move the next cohort until they figure things out with the BCC. So if that's the case, I would love to see copies of the BCC response and actually get a timely update about how probation is responding. Actually, Deputy Chief Fletcher, is it true that you're now going to Well, actually, can you say a little bit more about the plan you submitted to the BSCC on October 14th? Because my understanding is that you were going to try to see if that one-to-one ratio could be adjusted. And now I'm hearing you say that it has to be held until November 30th. Could you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry if I was not clear. So we submitted when our representative came out on September 13th, she identified areas of concern with the facility. In those conversations we were able to make some immediate changes to fencing and ensured that to mitigate some of the safety concerns, we would provide one-on-one supervision. So that has happened with the 6th youth. So what I submitted on October 14th to the BSCC really just restated some of the concerns that they had identified during that visit on September 13th and provided them an update of where we were at with each of those items. So that was submitted with a request that we are able to add more youth to Kilpatrick without changing the staffing ratio. Because if you've been in those cottages, you know that if there's one-on-one supervision, that's a lot of people in those units and cottages. And so we're really trying to negotiate with, an added 4 or 5 or 6. What does that look like? And so November 30th is one of the updates that we provided the BSCC as the timeline for which the anti-climb fencing and the roller bars would be installed. We did not ask the BSCC or convey to them that we were waiting until November 30th. We want to be able to move the next cohort while those repairs are being made. So that's not our intent to wait till November 30th to move the next cohort.
Thank you. You mentioned, I guess I'm just wondering, with the one-to-one staffing ratio, what is your capacity at Kilpatrick?
So right now the one-to-one is the 6, correct. So we want to move more youth with the existing staffing levels.
How many young people could you have at Kilpatrick while maintaining the one-to-one moving forward?
Right, so that's where it becomes a challenge, right? So because the population at Kilpatrick was reduced and then eliminated for a camp kid, pending the transfer of SYTF youth, most of those staff were reassigned from Kilpatrick to the juvenile halls. And so the need right now is for those Kilpatrick staff to remain in our halls. So if one-on-one supervision is required moving forward until everything is resolved in terms of security, we would then have to pull those Kilpatrick staff from the halls back to Kilpatrick. So that would impact us in the halls. And so that is something that we will work out to determine what possibly could be done. The problem, I think, more inherent is if you are getting to capacity, having all of those staff and all of those young people in units and cottages together is really overwhelming. So we're hoping to move away from the one-on-one supervision, and that is really our request from the BSCC. And the letter that I mentioned, they indicated that we would be receiving it today, actually.
Thank you. Just one question. When it comes to sort of determining, just putting quotes because I don't know how I feel about it, but the readiness of young people to move to Kilpatrick, I know that you've mentioned before that there's a lot of people involved in those discussions, and a lot of it was different staff, whether it's probation or DMH. You've mentioned Healing Dialogue and Action and other people. Are the young people involved in those discussions at all or consulted? Because a lot of these criteria, of course, are subjective, and just wondering if young people are being able to explain for themselves, if they're allowed to invite another caring adult or someone to be with them to be part of these conversations.
Yes, they are involved, as are their attorneys. And so that we thought that was a really important part, so that the attorney is present and can also share and bring in any other information that should be considered. So that MDT happens, and then certainly with the group of young people that have been determined to be ready, then other groups and conversations are happening with those young people together as well. Healing Dialogues has been a big portion of that conversation, which has been really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Garcia-Leyes, you're up.
I think Dominic got the most of what I wanted to say. I'm just trying to make sure I understand when the next cohort is going over. And Chief Fletcher, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing is we don't have enough staff to do one-on-one ratio with a second cohort. And so the next cohort will not be moving until there's no plans to move the next group until the BSCC allows us to go to a ratio that's not 1-to-1. And the soonest that will happen is the end of November. So realistically, nobody should be expecting the second cohort to be moved to Kilpatrick until December at the earliest. Is that right?
No, just to clarify, I was notified at 10 minutes to 12 today that we would receive a letter from the BSCC later today. So they will respond to my request to be able to move an additional cohort pending the repairs, with a timeline of November 30th for the repairs. So that would mean an immediate move of the next cohort. The one-on-one supervision, it was used as a mitigating factor to the security issues until we could get those resolved. So some of the easier things to fix were repaired, and now it's just that supply chain issue. So we are asking, while we are waiting for that to happen, can we go ahead and move the next cohort with the same staffing level that we have now?
Okay, so if the BSCC gives us permission, we'll move faster.
Correct.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lewis, your hand was up. Did you take it down?
Just want to share that when they talk about the criteria, this is like, look at it from this perspective. If you have a group of, say, 17 kids in the unit, and half of them consistently get into trouble, fight, and the other half don't, the only way to get the half that doesn't want to adjust their behavior is for them to see that this group is moving forward. You can move forward too. If you take that same group of kids that are fighting consistently and you put them with the kids that are trying to move forward, you're going to basically sabotage the program that you're trying to set up. That's just the honest truth. And there's no other way to do it but to encourage them. Like we don't. I know one of the things that I saw, even when all of the kids go when they go out to rec, or when they have a special a meal, then that's not taken from them, but them being able to move forward to a less restrictive environment is it's just all you have to do is not fight. And if you think about it, that's important because every one of these kids needs to be safe. Every one of these young people need to be safe. And when we're in these conversations with them, like, they're giving us good reasons why, like, they will do it, and they're working on it. And sometimes they'll even be as honest as say, like, look, that was really immature of me. Like, I'll get it right in the next 30 days. And so they understand the reasoning behind it because we're having these conversations with them every single week. Come in, they had a fight, like, what's going on? You okay? Why were you fighting? and you have that conversation with them, and they'll tell you, they'll give you reasons why, and sometimes it might be immature, and they'll even say, yeah, I know it was real immature. I'll get it right in the next 30 days. This is like, behavior has improved significantly from what I've seen when I go in every weekend.
Thank you, Commissioner. I guess I'll wrap this up by just saying, Deputy Chiefs Fletcher and Bettino, and also for the chief, you know, I think there's been a long overdue thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. I know that many folks, including the POC, was expecting all of these things to be finalized by this point. But knowing the complexities of all the different parts and folks that need to be involved in these conversations, you know, it's in reflection and knowing that partnership is very important moving forward and has been in the past. You guys definitely deserve some thanks for this, and you know, I guess I'll speak for myself here, and other commissioners I'm sure feel the same way. Just grateful that things are moving. There's a lot of feedback that things are moving in the right direction. A lot of unknowns are now knows, and we understand sort of what's the next steps should be, and for that I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I think now we're going to shift around a couple items, and we're going to come back to item number 4 and move on to item number 5. And give me one sec here. Okay, so moving on to item number 5, we will discuss and take appropriate action on a report and questions from the Probation Department regarding progress towards eliminating the use of OC spray in juvenile halls and camps. Wendy, please proceed with this item.
Yes, thank you. This is actually going to be a short item. We left it on the agenda today because I think there are some things that are valuable to update the commission on today. Although we do not have our report prepared and ready to share. The main reason for that is that, well, let me just go back a little bit. First of all, as you all know, the commissioners and to many of the members of the public, the board has been very clear on their position about OC spray in terms of directing the phase out of OC spray. It's not an open question whether or not OC spray should be phased out, but there is an open question of how to phase it out that wasn't clearly identified by the board. Probation, in fact, identified the how to phase it out in a report that they provided to us and has shared updates on regularly since that report. I want to say that was well over a year ago, right, Chief Bettino? It was quite a while ago. And also the Probation Department has been transparently sharing OC spray deployment information with us and the public through us. And they have been doing, they were doing that on a monthly basis along with the report and comparing the OC spray deployment to the de-escalation and training efforts. And then for the balance of this year have actually been providing even more specific report on the specific areas in which OC spray are used within the halls. And just to be clear, the OC spray is only available for use in the halls, not in the camps. That's been the case. I think it was never allowed in the halls. I'm sorry, in the camps, if I'm correct about that. Is that accurate, Adam and Karen?
So Camp Onizuka did have it up at Camp Challenger, but other than that,
okay. So over the past year, both deputy chiefs have been very clear in their explanation around the pace of the steps, and that has been a result of COVID and the inability to do in-person training. And more recently, a direct result of the staffing crisis and the inability to pull people out of their positions because we need as many people as possible in the halls. So there have been steps forward in some places. In particular, I think that's evident in the numbers at Barry J, and steps backwards in other places. And that is going to be the focus of our report that Dr. Sarah Gongora is working on and will present at our next meeting, is identifying places where there are steps forward. And in particular, there are some units, in particular Barry J, where OC spray is just hardly ever used. And identifying why that is and what folks are doing and what has happened in those units to maintain a situation where OC spray isn't really considered a useful tool, except maybe in more extreme situations. And then also looking at some in particular units where there's the opposite direction. And many of those units are at Central Juvenile Hall. And when we look at the numbers, you can see this over the course of the months of the data that we've been sharing. You can see that there are, generally speaking, more deployments of OC spray at Central than at Barry J, even though the population is less. So the report is going to be sharing data that has been shared by the department, as well as a series of questions. We'll be sharing it with the department before sharing it with the public to make sure that it's accurate and clarified, and we'll do that between now and our next meeting. But the main reason that we waited on sharing the information is because the September and October numbers are interesting and alarming in some cases. So we wanted to make sure that we had the most accurate information and could present the most updated information for you at our next meeting. But overall, you know, the POC in terms of both the strategic operating plan and by the direction of following as the liaison to the board's support for the phase out of OC spray will be creating this report and submitting it to the public so that you all can see what the process has been. So I realize there's a lot of vagueness in what I just said, and there will be a lot more accurate information and factual information presented. But I did want to say that the updated reports are attached to the agenda today, as they have been nearly every meeting as we receive them. And so you're welcome to take a look at them yourselves, or you can wait for a report in November. And I wanted to offer Chiefs Bettino and Fletcher, if you wanted to say anything about this. I certainly don't feel that you have to, but if you have anything to report in advance of moving forward with the discussion.
I don't.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, Chair Carrillo, I will turn it back over to you and ask folks if they want to give public comment on this.
Okay, well, I'll give it back to you, Wendy, and see if you can facilitate that.
Thank you. We don't have any hands up, so if you want to give public comment on this OC spray issue, please raise your hand. All right, I don't see any, so we can turn that back over to commissioners.
Thank you, Wendy. I see Commissioner Nung's hand. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Want to hugely thank the POC staff for working on this analysis, because I've been itching for it for a while now. If I could just ask Probation just a couple of questions, and I think this will actually be important context as we look at the numbers, is I know with the staff shortages, field staff, we know that some SEO officers are in the halls as well right now. Are staff that aren't normally assigned to the juvenile halls, are they issued OC spray when they enter the hall?
So if they were previously trained or had OC, they are given OC. But if somebody has not been trained in it, nor have they carried it as part of their job assignment, they do not receive it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I don't have the requirements memorized, but I feel like I remember there being, for people being issued OC spray, some requirements for refresher courses. Are those requirements at all for people who are allowed to bring them in from the field?
Adam has the training piece.
So yeah, we do. I mean, the folks get trained, you know, that are working in detention get trained at the academy on the various, you know, policies, and then also on the use of it. The updated refresher training is offered on a consistent basis as well. I need to go back and check for this group of those who've been deployed. So anybody who has it and is using it is required to have refresher training on a regular basis. We'll need to go back and check to make sure that those who are coming in to deploy have had some of that refresher training. I do not know that off the top of my head.
Thank you. The one other question I had is actually a follow-up from the last time we spoke about this in June. Mr. Patino, you had actually mentioned something I was really excited about, which is you mentioned an early intervention system and that there's like one last revision that was being made to make it a more useful tool. And I believe you said that one of it would be being able to better identify which staff were deployed and sort of to see patterns. So just wanted to see if get an update on that system.
So there is sort of a final iteration and revision that's still ongoing. Our team in Systems Accountability Bureau is working to finalize all of that. And so once that is done, I know I had committed to sharing that with you all. So once we get that done, we certainly can bring that here and do some presentation for folks.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Last call for this item. Okay, thank you, Deputy Chiefs. Moving on to item number 4. Okay, good with time. Next, we will take up item number 4. We will discuss and take appropriate action on the community detention program and electronic monitoring of youth in Los Angeles County. We'll first hear from Probation Director Julia Vess, followed by Kate Westbird, who is an associate professor of law at George Washington University Law School. Julia, you're up. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I have a PowerPoint, just a few slides. So if that could be queued up, thank you. If you can go to the next slide, please. So just briefly, wanted to give you an overview for those who may not know the specifics, but Community Detention Program is a community-based crime prevention and intervention program. The officers work with the case-carrying probation officer to make sure that they're familiar with the history of the youth, if there is history, and that they're on the same page with the case plan objectives. Things like if they need to know about food insecurity, if they need to know that the youth is struggling with substance abuse, that kind of thing. And then once they collaborate, they support the service delivery within the youth's community in their home. So the youth is able to continue to go to their school and stay with their family. The basic goals of CDP are to reduce recidivism, protect victims, and support the youth remaining in the home. And it's an alternative to detention. Next slide. So I just wanted to give you some data about how we get referrals to CDP. And so I just went back to January and my staff compiled these numbers for me. And it just breaks down that the majority of the referrals come from the courts. And those are the numbers per month. And then I broke it down by DPO referrals and IDC referrals. Next slide. This is a snapshot of some of the offenses, and I just pulled 7 caseloads under 1 supervisor. I have 3 supervisors, but I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the youth that are being supervised in the community. And there has been a change over the years as I've spoken to some of my veteran supervisors who've been here a long time in this program. It used to be that CDP supervision was basically for youth who committed very low-level offenses, but now it's really more as an alternative for high-level offenses that normally in the past would have been detained in juvenile hall, but are now being referred out to CDP, and the youth are being detained in the home. And it's it still varies. There's still some low-level youth, some youth that commit low-level crimes, but as you can see, there's the high-risk criminality has increased in CDP. Next slide. I know there have been some questions about the number of deputies and the caseloads that they carry and the areas that they cover. So I know this is hard to read, it's very small, but these are the basic areas for each caseload. the cities that the CDP officer travels to meet the youth in their home and at their school. And the caseloads are generally low, as you can see in the numbers on the right, but there are some areas that tend to run high, as you see down towards the bottom of the slide. And what we implemented as the caseloads went down over the years is we've now have a requirement that CDP officers see the youth twice a week when their caseloads fall below five or below. Otherwise, it's once a week. Next slide, please. There had also been some questions about this data in terms of court compliance. And so this is the total youth since January that have come through CDP. The next slide, the next column is the number of youth that actually did go to court. And then there's a small percentage of youth that absconded and cut off their ankle bracelet. Next slide. I think that's it. Yeah. So I'm open to questions. I can also just tell you that the total number of deputies right now is 23, and there's 113 youth currently being serviced on CDP.
Thank you so much. Wendy, I know we're waiting for the professor, and she's on the East Coast, and I really want to hear from her as well. So I would like to maybe, I'm not sure if stall is the right thing I should do here, but let's go through the motions of maybe seeing if we have public comments, and if commissioners want to address comments ever made by Ms. Vest already, and then we can maybe circle back. If not, we can move on to item 6 and then come back. So what do you
think, Alex, I think we probably can do it either way if we take double public comment. So maybe it'd be better to let commissioners ask questions and then see if the professor arrives so that we can do public comment just once on this item.
Okay.
Does that sound okay, Alex? Just as long as the commissioners don't take any action before public comment.
Yes, that's fine, Wendy.
Great.
Thank you, Alex. Commissioner Nung, I saw your hand was up. Now it's down. Oh, it's up again. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. In compiling some of the numbers, I just have 2 clarifying questions. I don't know if you can pull up the slide again, but on one of the slides, you noted as far as how probation gets referrals. I know the great majority was court referrals, but there's a category for DPO referrals. Can you share a little bit more about how those referrals happen, what they're for, and the process for that?
So those are for youth who are already on HOP or home on probation, and perhaps I remember when I was in FFT, we would work collaboratively with the case carrying supervision deputies, and so sometimes they would get frustrated with and talk with us about, can you just help me have the youth go to school? That's one of the court orders, and they're just not going to school. Or sometimes it was a new crime that was committed, and so they would recommend CDP. It wasn't something, like something minor, but they just weren't following the conditions of probation. And then for IDC, it's for youth who come in the door for intake, and they make a recommendation for a youth that's usually what's called a wobbler, where it's not someone that you would detain, but it's someone that has a history of failing to appear, perhaps, or there's a lack of commitment by the family to get them to court, and so there's an attempt to it's called PROTAP, have them be on CDP so that they can go to court. But that it's ultimately up to the judge to decide if that's what they're going to do once they go before the judge, if they're going to continue it.
Okay, so just hit on something. So just to clarify for everyone, including myself, when a DPO refers someone to your department for electronic monitoring because of, say, help with compliance, is that something where the youth goes to court again before that young person is put on EM, or are you saying that they're put on?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, and it's, you know, I call it referral because I wanted to be consistent and clear about how the youth come into CDP, but it's really, when it's from the probation officer, it's a recommendation. And so it's up to the court.
And then, but differently than that, you said for IDC, if they recommend the EM, then the youth would be put on EM, and then it would be reviewed again once they go to court. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, I don't remember what slide. There was a slide about, I think it's slide 6, about court compliance. And so I'm just interested, there's only 2 categories. You have either youth went to court, which I assume is youth are on EM and went to their next set court date, and then youth who cut off the bracelet and therefore missed that court date. But I'm wondering when it comes to compliance, if you're tracking other things, for example, if young people are out of bounds, I'm just trying to get a sense of, my understanding is that sometimes when youth are seen as violating, then they are detained for that. And I just feel like that's not captured in this into this chart. So I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what happens, let's say, if a young person violates or goes out of bounds of the
Sure.
restrictions placed on them.
Yeah, so it depends on the court order, but in general, the requirement is that the youth not be out of bounds from the home, that they have exceptions to go to school. They sometimes have exceptions to go to counseling, church. And one of the big things that tends to be a violation is if the youth just doesn't go to school. And so most of the minute orders, roughly, I think there's only 2 courts that are flexible with this, but most of the courts require that youth are detained on first violation. So that's when the CDP officer has to bring the youth to the court, to, you know, present them before court again, to have the judge address why they're not following their conditions of probation or following the minute order.
Could you, I'm just wondering, just based on articles and things about this, could you say how often there are maybe errors, whether they're user errors that would cause young people to make, or something else that signals that a young person may be out of compliance but really isn't? Or
Well,
like
there's
electronic
communication.
failures, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Or electronic failures, just trying to figure out how
Okay.
reliable the units are.
Yeah, if there's electronic failures, that they're called tampers, and the CDP officer explores that with the company called Veritrax to make sure, was it just the machine was bombed? Was it, you know, so people aren't brought to court for those kind of things. In terms of school, they make sure to verify with the school in terms of they get attendance reports, they attach that to their court report before they send it to the commissioner or the judge. So yeah, they verify what, you know, is going on, and they talk with the parents about some of the obstacles that may be in play. There is some minimal discretion that CDP officers have to work with the families around school issues. If it's a matter of just being late a few times, they're not required to immediately have the youth go before court. They try to work with the families, but it's a fine line because they really do have to respect what the judges are asking in their minute order.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Dupuy, you're up.
Thank you. I think actually you may have answered some of my questions about like what I just didn't want to assume I understood exactly what home detention meant for young people and how it might differ for adults. But I guess I'm wondering about the process, you know, for the violation. Detention on a violation is very basically I'm stating this to make sure I understand it. The probation officer assigned would say, hey, you violated this, and now I'm going to detain you per the judge's order. Is that an accurate statement? Right. Okay. And so when a young person, I think about like all the things around youth development that might be different for adults and what kind of exceptions are made. Are there typically exceptions made for activities that like young people, we would want them to be involved in? Just off the top of my head, like exercise. Like what if you wanted to go on a run or something? I don't know, like wanted to get involved in physical activity. Are those typically the type of exceptions that are allowed for young people?
Yeah, and that's usually with the collaboration with the commissioner or judge. And so usually that's brought to the attention, say, hey, you know, my son is on a football team and he needs to do this, or my son is really committed to going to church and Bible study and he has to leave for these reasons. Funerals, those exceptions are made, and it's negotiated around, this is something that needs to happen. And then it's called an info to court, is sent to the court to let them know this is what we're doing with this youth. And is that okay with you? And it's just letting them know that this is what we're doing. So yeah, exceptions are made. And with youth, it's different than adults in that adults have what's called a GPS system that tracks every single thing they do. And that's not the case with youth. It's just a matter of checking that they're going to these pre-approved places and they're going to school and they're not out for all night and we don't know where they are and what they're up to, that kind of thing.
Okay, so are you saying that the ankle monitor that they have on is not GPS?
No.
Okay. Okay. So what is the purpose of the ankle monitor? I thought that was a GPS. Forgive me for my not understanding, but what's the purpose
No.
if it's not GPS?
A GPS, it identifies where they are at all times in terms of, it's kind of like, I guess what we use when we find directions on our phone. It's constantly monitoring where we are, but this is just checking that the youth is not away from their home. I don't know the technical differences and how one is, but I just know GPS is more invasive and that's why it's not used with youth. That consideration did come up a couple of years ago, and it was felt that that would be too much tracking and too invasive to use with youth, and not necessary.
Okay, but they still do have to wear an ankle monitor, so it tells them if they leave their home. But if they're
Right.
going to school every day, they are leaving their home, so they
Right.
know that's a thing. They just know that between the hours of this and this, that they're not going to be at home.
Right, and then we would just follow up with the school personnel to verify, yes, they did get there and they are taking,
I see.
following the classroom schedule, etc.
I see. Okay, and so thank you for that. So what are some of the like what would you say are the biggest challenges for young people to successfully complete a CDP program, like without being detained again?
I think it's challenging when the youth struggles with substance use or substance abuse, and it's a struggle for them to stay home when they have a substance abuse problem. It's also a struggle with, sometimes we get youth who never went to school until they committed some kind of crime and got on CDP, and then the bar is very high. It's expectation that you go every day, that you get to each period on time, you don't leave early. And so that's a big leap for some youth who don't have that, haven't exercised that muscle in years, haven't been going to school. So that's something that the CDP officers really work with the family around, developing that muscle and trying to get the courts to show grace. Sometimes I think it's a struggle when in trying to get the whole family involved in helping this youth succeed. But usually over a couple of weeks, that's very clearly communicated by the CDP officer, and it's understood that this youth can only succeed if the whole family system is involved in helping the youth succeed, and they're very clear on what the court is asking. And so there's a lot of communication around that, and getting the parents' signatures so they understand what is being shared with them in terms of what to expect. But I think my experience of supervising the last 3 years is that it's, even given those struggles, a majority of the youth do complete their 30 days. Some, in rare occasions, it's 60 days, most generally 30. They complete their time, they go to court, they have, you know, whatever adjudicated, and they go on with their lives.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Wendy, I hear the professor's in the house. Can you take it from here?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you so much, Ms. Best, for that presentation and the questions. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Kate Weisberg, who, as you said, Frankie is on the East Coast as a law professor at the George Washington University School of Law, but she actually has done quite a bit of work on the West Coast and is certainly considered a national expert in alternatives to incarceration, and in particular issues around electronic monitoring. So thank you very much. Kate actually had a really busy schedule today and was willing to join us for this window. So I'm thankful for that. And with that, we'll turn it over to her and to our team who has her slides. So welcome, Professor Weisberg, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Can you all hear me okay? Excellent. And I have no slides. I'll just make some remarks. I just want to say at the outset, I'm so sorry that I joined late, so I didn't hear the entire last presentation. I did get a chance to look at the slides, and so I saw those and I heard some of the answers, but I apologize if some of what I say is duplicative. Let me just pull up my notes. So thank you so much for having me. I am currently a law professor at George Washington School of Law. Previously, I was an attorney at the East Bay Community Law Center in Berkeley, in California, where I defended young people in juvenile court, many of whom were ordered to wear ankle monitors. And so I know the problem of the pros and cons of ankle monitoring in juvenile court, both from my academic research, but also from my days when I practiced in juvenile court. So in the next few minutes, I'll discuss my research on the use of monitoring in juvenile court and offer some recommendations. I will also address the question that I often get asked, which is some version of, isn't monitoring better than incarceration? The main takeaway from my comments, and I do want to say, even just hearing the last few answers, it sounds like, and I apologize that I'm not more familiar with the practices in LA, but it is reassuring that LA is not using GPS technology. I think that's a really good development, and that there's a limited amount of time that young people are on monitors. So I think those are two really positive aspects of what's happening in LA. That being said, I have a lot of concerns about the use of electronic monitoring in juvenile court. For the most part, it is a poor fit for young people. It often sets young people up to fail, while at the same time reproducing the racial, gender, and economic inequities that are, as you all know, very endemic to the carceral state. So let me just briefly describe my research and what I've found. So my research analyzes how monitoring operates, both in the adult and juvenile system. Before joining GW, I worked with the Samuelson Clinic for Law and Technology at Berkeley, studying the use of electronic monitoring in juvenile court in California in particular. And since then, I have analyzed how electronic monitoring operates in adult court. So, you know, I have to say the difference in how electronic monitoring is used in adult and juvenile court is not that different, which in and of itself is, I think, troubling given the significant differences between adults and children. So first, a few themes. Young people on monitors, whether it's radio frequency, which it sounds like what Los Angeles uses, or GPS, often have to comply with dozens of rules, very, very detailed rules. So for example, in Alameda County, where I practiced, young people on monitors had to comply with 26 different rules. These rules are one size fit all and do not accommodate differences in age, gender, mental or physical health, or housing status, differences that frankly impact people's ability to succeed on monitoring. The rules are often written at 11th or 12th grade reading levels. Rules are often cut and pasted from the adult system and not necessarily modified for adolescent development or young people with disabilities. And again, I'm not saying that that's what happens in LA, but that's certainly what our findings were writ large. Young people on monitors are almost always required to remain in the home unless they obtain pre-approval to leave, a process that any of us to plan our lives that far in advance. It's especially hard for young people, and that this type of social isolation where they're limited in where they can go is especially harmful for young people. Young people on monitors have very little privacy. So although LA doesn't use GPS tracking, which is, a good sign for purposes of protecting young people's privacy, there are still significant privacy concerns. The data collected from the monitors is not protected data, so it can be shared with law enforcement, and it often is shared with law enforcement. In fact, when a crime occurs, police will often go and see who was on a monitor, and that becomes their initial list of suspects. And that applies to whether it's radio frequency, which is the sort of the monitor that just monitors whether someone's home or not, or GPS monitoring. Many monitors also have audio features that beep and buzz, and of course the monitors are visible. So because, as you all know, juvenile court is meant to be confidential, these are serious concerns. This makes the monitor quite visible and sort of outs the status of the young person as being involved in juvenile court. The fourth point is that there are significant burdens on families. So for example, family members also have to agree to these rules. They have to maintain electricity, pay for a cell phone. Oftentimes the rules restrict who can come into the house. And of course, the home is subject to warrantless searches at any time. So this really strains the caregiver/parent-child relationship, and at a time when the relationship needs to be as stable as possible. And of course, violations can result in reincarceration. Let me just say this too. There's very little research that monitoring improves case outcomes for youth as compared to less intrusive measures. So I noticed in the slides that 596 of the young people who are in this program showed up to court. My question is, would they have showed up to court without the monitor, but with other additional support? And I've yet to see research that's convinced me that monitoring is necessary as compared to less intrusive measures. So before I get to my recommendations, or at least some general recommendations, let me just address the question that I get asked all the time: isn't this better than custody? There's no question for the subset group of young people who would otherwise be detained in the absence of monitors, monitors are better. In fact, I sometimes had to ask for my clients to be put on monitors because it was the only way the court would let my client out of custody. However, because we have such little data, we don't know if monitoring is in fact being used on young people who would otherwise be in custody. And the way that it's an alternative to detention, of course, is if it's only used on young people who would otherwise be in custody. So the real concern is that, a net widening concern, is that monitoring is being used on young people who would not or should not otherwise be in custody. More often than not, and this was certainly my experience practicing in California, monitoring is used in addition to custody. So in my experience, young people are detained for 1 or 2 days, then they're released on a monitor. And as you all know, even 24 hours in custody is extremely harmful. And even if young people aren't initially detained, they may be detained for technical violations and then experience this cycle of being detained, released, and being detained. It's rarely as simple as 1 day on a monitor versus 1 day in custody. Young people often experience both monitoring and custody, just at different times. The last thing I'll say about this question, isn't it better than custody, is the idea that just because it's better than jail doesn't make it good. Better than custody is a pretty low bar, especially when we're talking about young people. And I just think we should aim higher than justifying monitoring simply because it's an alternative or because it's better than custody. Let me conclude with some brief general recommendations, as well as some updates on what's happening in California, which you may already know, so I apologize. So my opinion is that monitoring is used too much in juvenile court and operates in ways that replicates the harm of custody, even if to a lesser degree. So I offer a few recommendations for reform. Ideally, first and foremost, it should be replaced with support that's less invasive. Supervision, as you all know, the best form of supervision is often the lightest form of supervision, or no supervision. Second, to the extent that monitoring is used, it should be limited and used in ways that are as harmless as possible. It should only be used if there's no less restrictive option. And if imposed, the rules should be no more invasive and restrictive than necessary. the rules should be individually tailored to the individual young person and not include rules like house arrest or other restrictions that aren't necessarily necessary. This whole idea of the sort of one size fits all, I think, should be rejected. The second thing is to eliminate detention for technical violations of monitoring rules. Young people simply shouldn't be reincarcerated for rule violations. The third recommendation is to collect and analyze data. And like I said, we know shockingly little about how much electronic monitoring is used. Frankly, the PowerPoint slides from tonight offer some of the first data I've seen out of LA about electronic monitoring in juvenile court. The fourth point is that GPS or just the house arrest, even without GPS, should not be used for children with cognitive or intellectual disabilities. It's an incredibly poor fit, especially for those young people. And fifth, I think it's really important that we impose privacy protections for the data that is collected through the monitor. The two updates of what's happening in California, and again, apologize if you already know this, is AB 1228 limits detention for people adults arrested for probation violations. Similar legislation or similar local ordinances could limit the detention for monitoring violations for young people. And then AB 2658 limits the use of electronic monitoring in juvenile court, including a prohibition on devices with audio features, and requires some data collection. So I just talked a lot. I'll stop, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. Wendy, I think we'll go back to our format. And so if we have any live or written public comments, let's do that first before we get into the commissioner's questions or comments.
Absolutely. So if you would like to make a comment on this topic, please raise your hand using the raise your hand function, or you can dial *3 on your phone and we'll be able to call your phone number. I see James Maddox, and James, I want you to speak, but I also heard your question and I'm going to ask it myself so that Julia can answer it. Julia, can you tell us what IDC stands for?
Sure, intake, detention, and control.
Thank you. James, I want you to speak. Go ahead and speak about what unless that was the only question you had. All right, great. We're going to unmute James, and that way he can have his full 2 minutes. Thank you for that clarification. We're putting the timer up. If anyone else would like to ask questions, speak.
That was the only comment.
Go ahead, James.
That was all I had. You answered. You asked it. That was it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for being here today. Anybody else? Okay, no hands. Turn it back over to you, Chair Carrillo.
Thank you, Wendy. Commissioners, any comments or questions for our panelists? I know we have we don't normally have someone from the East Coast join our meetings, but here you are, Kate. Thank you. I see Commissioner Garcia-Lays, you're up.
Thank you. The slides we saw earlier, sort of a random sampling, I guess, of the offenses on which have landed kids in this program. One of them was murder. It occurs to me that I may have been working on a misunderstanding that 707B offenses sort of required pretrial detention. How much flexibility is there within the law to have use this monitoring instead of detention for serious pretrial offenses?
Yeah, there's a couple for that. Supervisors, staff that committed murder, allegedly, they were charged for that. And what happens is they did come through intake, and the recommendation was to detain. They were detained, and then they went to court within 72 hours. And I don't know the details, but they were ordered CDP at that time by the courts. Now, it could be that they didn't have enough evidence. I really don't know what the circumstances were as to why they were placed on CDP. We were quite surprised ourselves.
Professor Weisbrod, so I share your concern, which is my number one with all of this, is if this is an alternative to incarceration, I support it. But if this is net widening, I have real problems with it. And then within that, there are, I want it to be the best program it can be. Do you have, so when I saw when I hear that the offenses that youth have allegedly committed who are in this program are getting more serious, that says to me that this is probably not a net widening, and that's a good thing. But we've been struggling to try and really figure out a methodology that would let us know what's going on. Do you have any recommendations on what we can do to measure which of those two things is happening?
Yeah, I think your instinct is right. I think that the more serious the crime, the more we know that it's not net widening, because frankly, for pretty serious charges, that suggests that it is perhaps being used in lieu of incarceration, and that in a world without monitors, perhaps that young person would remain in custody. I think it's a really hard empirical question to answer. I have yet to find, I keep trying to find, empirical experts who can help me analyze data to figure out the answer to that question, which is, in a world without monitors, how many of these young people would be in custody? Of course, that's only part of the question, because it's also how many of these young people should be in custody. And granted, the label murder is, of course, alarming, but I share, I think it's right that we don't know the details of that. So it's really hard to make any generalizations based on that charge alone. I think that the really important question is, can the goals, it's hard, I think, for people to articulate what is the purpose of electronic monitoring, like what are we trying to accomplish? Because once that question has an answer, then we can measure whether or not the program is actually accomplishing those goals. So if the goal for, say, pretrial electronic monitoring is that the young person return to court and doesn't flee, then the question becomes, well, can that be accomplished with something less intrusive than electronic monitoring? And we have examples of that. So for example, in New York City, they piloted a new program where they assist people with transportation to court, which is one of the reasons why people don't come to court, and also text reminders. So sort of less intrusive means of accomplishing the same goal. But I think part of what makes it so hard to evaluate whether monitoring is working or not is because everyone has a different definition of what working means, because I think we don't have a common understanding of what the actual goal of electronic monitoring is.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you, Chair Carrillo. Ms. Nestor, I was wondering if you could share with the commission what you told me in our preparatory meeting about the use of monitoring for youth who are not at home in LA County in placement.
Oh, yes. We now do allow CDP to happen in placements for a youth who is out of the home, but we still don't want to detain. So in the past, there was an issue, and this was before I came, where if we couldn't contact the family, or if there was a youth that didn't have active family members to support him or her, oftentimes youth were detained until a plan could be figured out. And now we're able to use CDP officers to go service the youth in their placement. I also wanted to add that in terms of the question of net widening, that and versus an alternative to detention, there's an attempt to, or an effort right now over the last 6 months to improve our intake screening tool to an evidence-based tool out of Alameda, so that it takes less of the guesswork out of the roughly 45% of youth that come to intake that could safely go home and do well without detention. And so that was already piloted, and we found that if that tool is replaced, if our tool is replaced at intake, then the detention numbers would greatly reduce. We looked at roughly 45 youth, and of those 45, right now under the current tool, 37 of them were detained because they met the current criteria, and under the new tool out of Alameda, only 17 youth would be detained, and a greater number of youth would be either released outright or released under CDP. So that's something that we're hoping to roll out early next year.
Sean?
That is so exciting. Because one of the things is, the question is, I mean, I want to put public safety at the top or near the top. And right now, I don't think that Sylmar or Central are making, like, spending a couple weeks there is not making the community safer, just the opposite. And I mean, I may not have felt that as strongly that way a year ago as I do right now. In fact, I know I didn't feel that as strongly a year ago as I do right now. So what you just said is potentially, I think, really profoundly important, and I would like to make sure that we keep following that, and that we are paying attention to the rollout of that new tool, and that we look carefully at the numbers after it does, because I mean, if we were sending, 17 instead of 45, if we were only keeping 17 out of every 45 people who we currently have in predisposition juvenile hall, I mean, that would do wonders to alleviate the staff to youth ratio we have. I think it would definitely make me feel more comfortable that we're not widening the net. I think that would really put this program where it should be. So we really want to find out more about that as it happens.
Can I just say one thing really quickly, just to echo what's been said, or to piggyback on it, which is that, 6 months from now, ideally, we would see the incarceration rates going down if monitoring is in fact being used as an alternative. In theory, you'd see the incarceration population, whether it's pretrial or not, or post conviction incarceration rates going down, while the monitoring rates either stay the same or go up. But what we would want to avoid is seeing the population of incarcerated young people staying the same, and electronic monitoring staying the same or going up, because then that really suggests that monitoring isn't actually being used as an alternative.
Any of the commissioners have any comments or questions? I guess before we wrap this up, Ms. Vest,
Yes.
might take it down to the lowest common denominator here, but you mentioned that when some youth cut off their monitors, and I suppose at some point either they're rearrested, are they charged for that? Or are they returned to, what happens there?
A bench warrant is issued, and then they just have to go before the court, and sometimes they're placed back on CDP.
And is the monitor returned to the county, or what happens to that? Do you know?
We don't usually get you're talking about the actual, no, we don't usually get that back, no.
So it's trashed, or there's
Yeah.
a way of, okay. Yeah, that was more about the question. Okay. Thank you both so much for your insight and expertise. Really appreciate it. Thank you. We are moving on now to item number, Wendy, is it 6 now? Help me out here. Yep, it's 6. So moving on to item number 6, we'll hear updates from our Executive Director, Wendy Julian, on the POC's progress towards completing its 2022 strategic goals, which will include an update on Monday's town hall for employees of the Probation Department. Wendy, please share your thoughts and updates.
Thank you, Chair Carrillo. I am very excited to talk about what happened at the employee town hall, both because of how positive of an experience it was, but also because it's a way that we can finally report that we've done some actual concrete work related to the training personnel management, which is one of our 4 subcommittees that has certainly received the least amount of attention over the last year and a half. So I'm very thankful to Chair Carrillo and Commissioner Canales and Commissioner Garcia-Leyes who attended the meeting, as well as, of course, all of the probation employees who attended, and to the PLC staff for putting it on. It was a great trial run for an in-person meeting, and we'll be getting ready to hold many more of those in 2023. And I want to let you know that we'll be sharing sort of an official document with a response for the items that came out. I'll be sharing that both with the probation department, the leaders of the probation department, as well as the board offices, so they can hear what that report was. So I just wanted to share with you some of my own takeaways, and then I'll ask the commissioners who are in attendance if they want to. Although I will say we're taking great care to maintain the anonymity of the folks who attended, and in particular what they said, because we want this to be a safe place. We also are going to be holding many more. We had about 30 people there on Monday, and there are between 4,500 and 5,000 employees in the department. So a very tiny sampling, and certainly not reasonable to accept as a monolith the opinions that were shared, since there's so much diversity within the department itself. But I think some of the themes were things we had heard before, and then there were some things, as I shared with the people there on Monday, that I definitely learned from the experience. Overall, not something that I learned, something that I've known by being in particular at the institutions where we spent time, is that the employees who were there are, dedicated, good people, worried about their safety. Many of them, in particular, those who work in the halls and camps, in the facilities. We actually didn't hear safety concerns about the field. It was really focused on safety concerns in the facilities, and who are genuinely concerned about the future of their jobs. And I think that is something that we are aware of as a commission, and our role in that, and ensuring that there is continued opportunities for conversation around what that means, what the county's plan is for the future of, in particular, the juvenile side of probation, and how we can help there to be constant communication for people to address those concerns. We also heard information about the staffing crisis, really digging down deep and what's causing the staffing crisis, and how it is directly related to morale, but also to a lack of training and a lack of what many people in the room described as tools. This was probably the area that I learned the most about on Monday, which is what they meant by tools. I think I had a predisposition to think that people mean by tools things like OC spray, and that's not what they were talking about at all. They were talking about tools including their colleagues, well-trained and well-staffed facilities, as well as things like programs and resources to be able to provide for youth. So there were specific mentions of things like recreation and sports leagues, and a lot of support systems that folks feel like existed in the past that don't exist at such a significant level today. That was a very optimistic outlook for me, because that has also been really the focus of this commission in terms of ensuring that young people in the facilities have access to programs, resources, highly trained staff who feel like they want to be there and who feel safe in their jobs. So a lot of shared goals and areas where I think we can work together to ensure appropriate investment in the right places in the department. We did talk a little bit about how the Probation Oversight Commission has been so focused on not just facilities, but SYTF. And it became clear that even though definitely not the majority of the folks in the room work in SYTF, of course, because there aren't that many folks directly working in SYTF, they understand that it is in fact juvenile facilities, and in particular the closure of DJJ, that is the most challenging issue facing the department at this time, and something that requires the highest level of planning and preparation and training and thought going into it. So then finally, I'll share some of the concerns that I had in listening, and then I'll ask the commissioners if they want to share. One is that there is an overwhelming sense of resignation, despair, a lack of hope among folks who are talking. And I don't mean that as a criticism of the employees that were in the room, but rather a concern about staff morale in general. I think it's something we've talked about in these meetings, and that I'm hopeful that the continued conversations between the POC and staff will help to improve. And also concern about a lot of oversight and a lot of responsibilities for folks to have to hold the burden of being criticized for the jobs that they do. So that's something I think I can relate to and understand where they're coming from. It was a very high level of respect and civility with which these opinions were shared. And it's something I think we should be concerned about and look forward to finding solutions to as an oversight body, as well as a liaison from the board. And then finally, I think there is a concern that you may hear from the commissioners as well about a different opinion. And this, I mean, a different opinion among probation employees, not between the commission and the employees, about how we view the people that we serve. And the view by some that there is a need for profound trauma-informed care and a care first, jails last mentality, and the view by others that there are deep safety concerns and a concern about how things are going. So the divisions among staff, I think, show that the department is not monolithic, doesn't all speak with one voice. There isn't one opinion that belongs to all employees. And I'll just close by saying how thankful I am for these continued conversations and to the leadership. The chiefs, all three of them, were in constant communication with us before the meeting. We really thought a lot about their attendance at the meeting, decided ultimately it was best for them not to attend and for us to report back. But they we were able to share the information, and it's really nice to be able to do this in a collaborative manner. And we look forward to doing this again. So we're going to schedule at least 3 more. They will be in the evening, hopefully more accessible schedule wise. And we're going to work directly with labor. So we'll be scheduling at least 1 session with each union and hold them at the facilities for their members. And then we may do one other broad open session like we did on Monday for employees who either weren't able to come or aren't represented, which there are a few within the department who fall into that category. So with that, I'll ask the commissioners if you wanted to add anything to those comments.
Sure. Wendy, thank you so much. And I would just add that I was very impressed with the turnout, the candor and openness that was in the room. There were a lot of things that I learned about that had become, well, that were voiced and were really important things that I didn't even know were on the spectrum or on people's minds. And so it's good to know that there's more things to focus on. I guess lastly, I'll just say that I think everyone was asking and really appreciative of just the respect that everyone's deserving of. And yeah, for those, it was a confidential meeting, but regardless of that, it was people really spoke their minds. So I really appreciated that. Commissioner Canales?
Thank you, Commissioner Carrillo. Yes, one of the things that I seem to hear from many was, especially those that have been around with the department for quite a while, was all the successful programs that probation had at one time, not just for the staff, but for the youth. And even UCLA studies conducted. Now, we all know here on this panel how much we love UCLA studies. And there's been UCLA studies on positive programs that were somehow pulled, where even probation staff stays baffled. Like, this was working, the kids loved it, their energy, their success, when they left. And then somewhere along the line, I don't, and not this, because we're talking about a different time. I'm not saying this administration, but somewhere along the line, somebody gets a call, administration pulls this program, pulls that, things that were actually working, to where now we've gotten in a more stage of, punitive stage, to where everything, it's like we look at probation as these pepper spraying, baton beating, employees, where so many of them even spoke about having that background and coming from certain areas that a lot of the youth did, and having that connection of experience. While yes, you depended on who spoke. We heard some of you have to be careful with these youth, but for the most part, I was hearing a lot of the positive that they long to have back. And then this I even did bring up in the meeting, when you sit and look in the room and you see you know, who is right now worried for their jobs. And I agree with them here. I mean, if we are just going to shut probation down right now today, let's just say it and do it and give everybody peace of mind. Or are we working towards solutions? Are we working towards what's best for the youth, what's best for the staff, but yet decreasing probation's footprint? Because we also have to deal with the reality of the $1 billion budget. We have to deal with the reality of, other changes that have taken place. I know I've read reports where a staff at 8:30 lights out, at 8:34 is writing youth up and giving their total opinion on this hopeless, worthless youth disrupting night behavior at 8:34, 4 minutes after. That's what we need to look at. That's the problems that we need to hone in on. And so yeah, I thought it was a great meeting and with a lot of insight and valuable feedback.
Okay, before we get into any other, unless Sean, you want to share anything, we'll get into public comments, Wendy, then we can open it up to the rest of the commissioners.
I'll just say, I agree with everything you guys said. But what came through clearest to me was that people feel that the level of violence in the halls has reached a crisis point. Some people said they've been saying that for a while, but others seem to say like, no, now this is a real crisis. They are right that they are the ones who are physically putting themselves on their personal safety on the line every day because of this crisis level of violence. And at the same time, they are blamed for it. And at the same time, their solutions, there's no real institutional way for their solutions to be considered. I mean, what do we had? We've had a few dedicated employees calling on public comment for 2 minutes to the Probation Oversight Commission and at the facilities telling their supervisors. I have not seen really any opportunities for staff to come up with organized positions on how to solve these problems and deliver them to decision makers. And I think that needs to happen. Yeah, I mean, I certainly won't agree with many of the solutions they come up with. I mean, I think a lot of them are short-term, maybe they're needed right now, but are not long-term solutions. But there was a lot of raw emotion that came from exposure to violence. And if our staff are so shook by the violence in the halls right now, I can only imagine what's happening to the youth who are there pretending they're not scared. That's what I took away most, was that this is not normal times in the halls. And that it's starting, that the kids are bringing that culture and those problems with them to the camps now too, so that this is a problem that may not be confined any longer to the halls. That also really shook me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Wendy, can we go on to public comments, please, and then we can circle back.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for those comments. I also wanted to just add, attached to my report on the agenda today is the ProbeStat data, which is awesome. It is the juvenile report, and I highly recommend that you look at it. It shows a lot of information about what probation's doing and who they're serving and how they're serving them. And they have continued to share that information with us so we can share it with you. So it's just a direct copy of what they prepare for their internal review, and I encourage you to take a look at it. So if you'd like to give public comment, please use the raise your hand function or dial *3 on your phone, and we'll start with James Maddox. James, we're going to put the clock up and then unmute you. Hopefully. There we go.
Muted now?
Yes.
Terrific. Quick question structurally. You skipped matters not posted?
That comes next.
Oh, okay. That's fine. I shared with Wendy and Chief Fletcher a audit that was conducted by the state auditor on batterer intervention programs in LA County Alameda, Contra Costa del Norte, and San Joaquin County. And to quote the mission control at Apollo, we have a problem. And I think that hopefully Wendy or the chief will, or you all will take a look at the report. It's about 70 pages and it addresses some of the issues around batterer intervention programs. And most enlighteningly, it's not the providers that are the problem. It's the judges and the probation departments that are the problems. Anyway, that's all. It's a great report. It's an easy read too. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands at this time, so we'll go back to you, Chair Carrillo.
Thank you, Wendy. Commissioners, any comments or questions? I'm looking over at the participants roster here for hands. I see one. Commissioner Dupuy.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Commissioner Canales' question earlier about whether or not any solutions are being explored around jobs, in particular for probation. And I did just want to make a statement here, and for any of probation employees that are listening, that there are efforts going on to people explore what it looks like for transitioning to different areas of work, and how that might be able to be facilitated so that people aren't just one day like out of a job and that people don't have those concerns. So there is groups of folks, like stakeholders, that are trying to think through different county positions. How do you open up some for existing probation officers, maybe exclusively? How do you incentivize early retirement if that's on people's lists? I mean, whatever you could possibly think about around job transitions, there's like several groups trying to think about this so that it won't be an issue and a concern. I'm happy to talk more about that at a later date, but I did want to make that statement in response to Commissioner Canales' question: is anyone working on solutions? And for any probation employees that are listening today or might listen in the future, that people are thinking through solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, seeing no other hands, we'll be moving on to item number 7. And item number 7, this is directed towards commissioners and POC staff. Please, 1 second here. Okay, so are there any matters not posted on the agenda to discuss or to place on a future meeting agenda for action? Commissioners, staff, I see some hands up now. I'll go from the top. Commissioner Nung, you're up.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a moment to share with the public that for personal reasons, I have decided to step down from the commission. It's been an honor to serve on it, and I will continue serving until a new commissioner is appointed. I believe Wendy will be saying more about that process later.
Thank you, Commissioner Nung. Next up, Commissioner Yamashiro.
Thank you, Chair Carrillo. So I likewise am resigning. I think all of you received my letter of resignation that I submitted to Supervisor Mitchell this morning. So I just want to take just a brief minute to say thank you to everybody, especially the POC staff and Wendy in particular. I think I've had the misfortune of having to, and also the privilege of having to start something from scratch a couple times. And Wendy has, in her very short tenure, really built out a staffing structure and put processes in place and thought through so many things that we have the luxury of just showing up for. And I just really think she's done an incredible job. I wanted to say thank you for that. And she also has, I think we should be mindful of the fact that she also, unlike the members of the commission, who are either appointees or at large, whose sole responsibility it is to oversee the department. She is an employee of the county and has to do very delicate dance as of kind of, I wouldn't say an advocate, because I know that's not necessarily her role, but I know that's in her DNA. And she's kind of really lived true to that and has been an incredible asset. And so I really wanted to thank her and the rest of the commissioners for all of your support. I did want to say one thing, and I'm really saddened by the fact that that Don's not here, because I just wanted to give a shout out to Don, because he and I have been kind of at this for probably 12 years. And I'm sure we could both comment on our own professional evolution through this process. And I have to say, you know, we have sat on opposite sides of most, if not, I wouldn't say all, but many, many issues. And it's always been incredibly professional, and it's always been cordial. And I have tremendous respect for him. And I think it's also, we should be mindful of how hard it is. Many times he's in the minority. I mean, not always, but historically he's been there, and it's really difficult to play that, to be that person. But he's always done it with, you know, with grace and respect for everybody else. And I think that that's incredibly important. And so I wanted to thank him personally, but I'll maybe give him a shout out or call after we're done. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Commissioner Dupuy, you're up.
I hate to be the third person on this train, but I have mentioned to many of you all so that I have taken a position in that will relocate me to DC, Washington, DC, and therefore I will no longer be eligible to serve as a probation oversight commissioner, which, so I think last meeting will be in December due to that transition. I really also just thank everyone, you know, for everything that they do. Wendy, you in particular, I really appreciate all of the ways that you have supported us. And also Erica, I wanted to give you a shout out as well. I mean, the list could go on. I think all my fellow commissioners, it has been really a great experience to be in collaboration and thought partnership with you all as we try to do this important work. And so I'll leave it at that. And I appreciate you all. I'll still see you for, I think, 1 or 2 more meetings though.
Thank you, guys. Any other hands? Oh, I see Wendy's. Hi, Wendy.
Sure. Well, thank you for your kind words. Although, you know, I'm just the staff, and you know, it's been a lot of work, but honestly, a big part of why this has been such an incredible experience for me is the 9 of you, and to lose the 3 of you today for differing reasons is really, I'm sad about it, and I feel so grateful and thankful for your contributions. They are diverse. The 3 of you bring very different things to the table in terms of your experience and your approach, and at the same time, a shared sense of urgency and bravery, and most importantly, a deep love for the communities that are being served by the probation department, and in particular, the young people in the facilities. You all have dedicated your careers to this in addition to being commissioners. I mean, a commissioner is just a tiny blip on the 3 of your resumes in this respect. So I really thank you very much for being the architects with me of this and being involved since the inaugural meeting. And I'm glad you made that shout out to Don, because, you know, your role here is not, it's unique in having been a member of the original Probation Commission and then the PRIT in forming this. So thank you for, you know, creating a job for me and and for this experience. So Commissioner Yamashiro is in a different position than the other 2 commissioners, in that he is an appointee from Supervisorial District 2 and will be replaced by Supervisorial District 2, then a vote for the board. The other 2, Commissioners Dupuy and Nong, are both at-large commissioners, which means that we get to appoint 2 new commissioners. So I welcome you all who are listening. So many of you who are on the call today have been longtime listeners, to think about who you might want to encourage to apply. We will be sending out a press release and a bulletin. It's sort of like a job application in a lot of ways. It's sort of like a job in a lot of ways. I will be totally honest about that. And the process will be that we will send out that application. We'll have a window in which we'll be receiving applications from folks. We'll appoint an ad hoc committee who will sift through the nominations and applications and then bring a group of those for interviews. After those interviews will be brought to the Probation Oversight Commission for an election, in this case of two, to go forward and hopefully to be approved by the board. So that's the way this process will run, and we encourage you to apply and let others know that you'll be applying, and also let others know that they might apply. So if you're not on our listserv, please go to the website and sign up for the listserv, because the information will be going out that way, or feel free to email me directly or Janae, and we'll get you that information. But really, my warm thank you to making this this process be so enjoyable to the three of you, and I really look forward to hearing about your work to come, and following your careers. And as I told Dominique yesterday, although I expect this from the three of you, I hope to hear you in public comment and maybe on a panel going forward. I think that will likely be appropriate. So I appreciate the time to speak, Chair Carrillo. Thank you.
Absolutely, Wendy. And commissioners, you guys will all be missed, and thank you for your service and great work. Okay, moving on to item number 8 is an invitation for members of the public to address the commission on items not on the agenda. Wendy, please facilitate public comments for us.
I will. And also I forgot something, which is that we are rescheduling our meeting of November 10th, which is the next scheduled POC meeting. There is a memorial service that day for Chief Ray Leyva, and we want to both support probation employees attending that and not have to hold a meeting on that same day in honor of his memorial. So we have not yet chosen a new date and are looking for a date that works for both commissioners and probation leadership. And we'll get back to you soon, but it will be in November. We also may split the meeting into 2 shorter meetings. We have some really unique topics that I think could work at separate meetings. So please keep your eye out for those calendar invitations, and we'll be sure to send it out to our listserv as soon as we have time. As soon as we have times and dates selected. I don't see any hands. Is there anyone who'd like to give general public comment on items not on the agenda? Dial *3, raise your hand. Don't see any.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Okay, that moves us into
Krista has just raised her hand. Can we?
of
All
course.
right. Thank you, Krista. We'll put the timer up and you can begin.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay. I actually just wanted to say, farewells on behalf of the probation people that are jumping on this call all the time, to the 3 that are leaving, to thank them for their collaborative efforts and assisting us. But I really wanted to speak to Miss Dupree. I don't know how to say your last name. I'm sorry. I just want to say that I wish you the best of luck. I think you are awesome. And I think that you have came into this POC with transparency and a lot of heart and honesty. And we don't get to see that a lot. And you've asked great questions. And I wish you the best of luck. And that's all I have to say, Wendy.
Thank you. Okay. That's the last hand, Frankie.
Thank you, Wendy. Okay, thank you all for your comments. As a quick reminder, be sure to follow us on social media at lacountypoc.gov. Also subscribe to our new YouTube channel by searching Probation Oversight Commission and clicking subscribe. To receive reminders about our upcoming meetings, visit our website at poc.lacounty.gov to subscribe to our email listing. It is now 2:07 and I adjourn this meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.